All right. Hey, everybody. This is Jesse Cohen. We're trying out a new webcam today. So hopefully I look better than it has in the past using the same old mic. We're going to let people join slowly here before we get into what happened at practice today. If you want to ask questions, you can go ahead and do so on any of the platforms that you're watching on, or you can text in your questions 323-628-1008. Again, I just attended LA Kings practice. And we went to the locker room. We talked to head coach Jim Hiller afterwards, and some stuff happened today at practice. It wasn't just a boring practice. There were some changes. Dennis Bernstein, I saw already on social media, has commented on some of them. So I guess we'll just jump in and start talking about them. First up, Corey Perry was on the number one power play unit today at practice, and it sounded very much talking to Coach Jim Hiller like that would be something that is seen in the game. Corey Perry and Andrei Kuzmenko appear to have switched places on the power play units. Corey Perry obviously having a tremendous amount of success early on in front of the net, and that was something that they wanted to get on that first power play unit. Jim Hiller had been asked recently, when do you change the power play unit? It hasn't been as effective as it was down the stretch last year, and in fact, it's starting to bleed momentum for the other team, resulting in shorthanded goals and chances against, and it's not producing. So you got to change something. Not only will Corey Perry be on the top power play unit, but it appears that Andrei Kuzmenko will not be joining Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe on the top line either in the next game. Again, this is just practice, so who knows what will happen in the game, but it looks like Yoel Armia will be skating alongside Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe on the top line, with Kuzmenko slotting in to the third line with Phil Danault and Trevor Moore. Now, at the beginning of the season, one of the questions I had for the Kings going forward in the season was, will the top nine line chemistry stay the same? Because if it doesn't, my concern was that you have to start jumbling lines, and there's no guarantee that you'll be able to find chemistry that worked the way the lines did at the end of last season. And so already now, for 13 games, 14 games, depending on where you want to put it, we're now starting to see those lines jumbled. And part of that is Fogel's injury. Part of that is that Laferriere was moved around earlier, but now we have Andrei Kuzmenko being bumped off, not just the top line, but also the top power play unit. Jim Hiller said today after practice he had not yet had a chance to talk to Kuzmenko, but that he would. So that's a fairly big change 13 games into the season. Especially when two of the top three players on your former top line are unrestricted free agents at the end of the year, including Andrei Kuzmenko. That is something that you have to factor into how long you want to see this. Speaking of how long, I believe it was in an episode of All the King's Men when I want to say I was talking to Eric Stevens, I mused that I thought we would eventually see Ceci and Dumoulin. Maybe I should say Dumoulin first. I wondered when we would see Dumoulin and Ceci put back together as a defensive pair. They only played 3 games together at even strength to start the season. Based on practice today, it looks like Dumoulin and Ceci will be reunited as an even strength pair. And before everybody freaks out and starts lighting their hair on fire, they were not great together, but it was a very small sample size. It was 3 games at even strength to start the season, and those games were chaotic, to say the least. So the two of them have been playing together as a penalty killing pair and have been effective. When asked about it, Jim Hiller commented that part of it was, just giving them a chance to reunite at even strength, but also bringing up the fact that Mikey Anderson, his time on ice took a hit when he was separated from Drew Doughty. Now, I wondered privately how long we would see Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty separated because, as Jim Hiller said after practice today, they like Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty together, and I believe that Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty like playing together. We have one comment so far. I'm so glad Hiller went 6-on-4 when we were down by 2 late. He is usually so conservative with stuff like that, and I just hope that them scoring doesn't stop him in the future. Number 2, Kings kind of looked like they were not together tonight, like something is off in the locker room. What do you think? Oh, this was from Saturday. Sorry, I'm reading an old comment. But that was, that concept of them, doing things differently has definitely come up a lot. And I commented, on it on All the King's Men. It feels, even though the results are much, much better than they were in the season that Todd McClellan got fired, in those weeks leading up to Todd McClellan's being relieved of his duties, a lot of the rhetoric is beginning to sound a lot is beginning to sound very similar to what was happening back then. There's a lot of, we're out of sync, things just aren't in line, there's just not happening, but don't worry about it. We'll just keep doing the same thing. We'll keep plugging away and things will get better. We believe that things will get better. And it's that I'm not sure that there's a much more sophisticated answer that can be given than we believe that things will get better, but it's just not the most, calm, inspiring thing to hear when like the team is struggling. And I've heard some people complain to me on social media and privately that 4-0-1 road trip did not instill a ton of confidence. Two of them were overtime wins. The one game they lost, they probably should have won. And then the two wins against the Sharks and the Blackhawks, those are not exactly world beating teams. Going to the comment section, maybe Kuzmenko moving down is able to help Danault's line get more energy. Maybe. I mean, I don't believe that that's the motivation for that change, but that could be a potential benefit. I've seen some people say that Kuzmenko could replace the role that Arvidsson played on that line when he was here. Another comment, I was waiting for your review of the Devils game. The team looked like they were busy watching the World Series instead of the puck. Listen, I'm not going to lie. That's why there was no post-game show against the Devils. The Dodgers game was still going on at the end of the Kings game. And I had a friend who was at the game that wanted to meet me afterwards. So I didn't even go to the locker room, full disclosure. I went out to the plaza and collected a loaf of sourdough bread that somebody made for me. And then we watched the Dodgers game. And then I tried to navigate that nightmare of downtown traffic to get home. So apologies to anybody that was waiting. There will be a post-game show after the Winnipeg Jets game and after the Florida Panthers game. That Devils game was an outlier. But yeah, it was a weird game when all of a sudden there's a neutral zone play, nothing's happening. The game's been somewhat boring, and all of a sudden the crowd erupts because, the Dodgers get a home run in the ninth inning. And I just wonder what goes on in the players' minds when they're not doing anything interesting. This sourdough is very good, Matt. Thank you. I haven't eaten all of it yet, but I've had a couple slices and it's very good. But yeah, so it's got to be weird, and it's not the first time it's happened. But getting back to Dumoulin and Ceci, sorry. I asked Jim Hiller today after practice because he mentioned that they wanted to get Mikey Anderson more ice time and that they wanted to let him know that he was part of the team and they needed to didn't need to, but they wanted to reunite Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty. And I said, okay, well, that's now two different defensemen that we've talked about as far as their ice time, and the coaching staff feeling compelled to find them more ice time, Brandt Clarke and Mikey Anderson. So, I said, is there an ideal version of the blue line? Do we have a blueprint of what the blue line core, the defensive core, looks like as far as minutes, distributions, pairs? Is there an ideal setup that we're going to try and get back to? If we get away from it, that we're going to try and find our way back to? I'm saying we rhetorically. And the answer was not really. They're going to play it situationally, moment by moment. Jim Hiller was asked if playing Brandt Clarke multiple minutes over the last two games, I think he played over 20 minutes both of the last two games, was that because the team was, trying to find offense in those moments. For example, in the New Jersey game, to the commenter's point that I just read, they pulled the goaltender and they were trying to crawl back into that game. So that's generally when Jim Hiller has leaned on Brandt Clarke in the past, is when they're chasing the lead and they're trying to climb back into it. The last two games, Brandt Clarke played a ton of minutes, and Jim Hiller was asked again, is that coincidence or did that have something to do with it? And he wasn't committal on that, but he definitely acknowledged that might have played a role in it. So we'll have to see moving forward if reuniting Anderson and Doughty is something that lasts. I personally suspect it will. Those two have been a pair for a very long time, and the organization is usually reluctant to split them up. We've talked a lot about it on All the King's Men and other platforms. Dumoulin and Ceci are an effective penalty killing pair, but in those three games they played together at even strength, they were victimized for I think 5 goals at least and no goals for. But a lot of that, I wonder how much of that is that the style of game the two of them play is going to succeed on the penalty kill, but maybe not succeed in a back and forth game where both sides are looking to trade transition chances and rush chances, right? Like Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin are not going to be moving the puck up the ice and are not exactly known for their swiftness of foot. So on the penalty kill, when you're playing a much more stationary sort of half court defense, if you will, or third rink defense, that's the kind of player that might excel in that role that wouldn't necessarily, excel at even strength. If you're a shot blocking stay-at-home defenseman, the penalty kill is where you earn your stripes. So we'll see how that pair works out. And more importantly, we'll see if pairing Dumoulin and Ceci together at even strength impacts the minutes for Brandt Clarke, because presumably with Mikey Anderson pairing with Drew Doughty again, that pair will get the bulk of the minutes. I mean, that's how it's been. That's how it should be, theoretically, your top pair. And to be clear, Anderson and Doughty are a top pair in the National Hockey League. I understand that Mikey Anderson's offensive game is not the same as Cale Makar, and I understand that people have concerns about Doughty's health and age and all that. But just to be clear, the two of them are an effective defensive pair in the National Hockey League and have been for years. I'm just going to keep coming back to that results versus optics thing. The optics may not be great, but the results are there. They're an effective defensive pair. They're going to play minutes. And so if they play minutes, and if Dumoulin and Ceci are killing penalties together as a pair, I'm assuming they'll probably get minutes as an even strength pair. What does that mean for Brandt Clarke? Because Brandt Clarke doesn't kill penalties. And if they don't have a ton of offensive opportunities, I think they had, 5 power plays the last game, something like that, to no penalty kills. That should bode well for Brandt Clarke's ice time. But if they get a lead early, are they going to lock it down and try and defend the rest of the game? Does that mean that Brandt Clarke doesn't get a ton of ice time? If it's a back and forth game and they're not chasing it the whole time, does Brandt Clarke it's just something to watch out for. It's very peculiar. And of course, Corey Perry on the top power play makes all the sense in the world until you start thinking about it as a 5-man unit. So 5 forwards on the power play. Corey Perry takes Andrei Kuzmenko's spot. No problem. Makes sense as an isolated decision. But what does that mean for Andrei Kuzmenko? What does that mean for his ice time? What does that mean for his mood, for his effectiveness? Is Andrei Kuzmenko the kind of player who needs to play a certain amount of minutes to get his groove going, to get invested in the game? I'm not sure. We haven't had a body of work large enough to get a real feel for Andrei Kuzmenko. And through no fault of his own, Andrei Kuzmenko's native language is not English, so it's not always easy to communicate, complex concepts like that in a one-on-one interview, or not one-on-one, but like in a scrum after a practice or after a game. You're not going to sit Andrei Kuzmenko down and ask him, do you feel like you need to get into the game to get a rhythm going? It's not that kind of conversation. So anyway, we'll see how it works. Meanwhile, there were some roster moves. We would have gotten into this had there been a post-game show after the Devils game. There wasn't. But Kyle Burroughs was activated off of injured reserve, placed on waivers, cleared waivers, and assigned to Ontario. Meanwhile, Warren Foegele was placed on injured reserve, retroactive to, I want to say, the 26th of October. I think it was whatever the last game he didn't play in was, or the first game he didn't play in was. And there was some confusion about this. And I think I sorted out the timeline of events. So if anybody's curious about this, or wants to correct my assumptions, go ahead. But my understanding is that you cannot assign a player to the AHL if they are injured and if they're on the injured reserve list. So in order for Kyle Burroughs to be assigned to Ontario, he had to be activated off of the injured reserve list. They didn't have enough room on the roster for Kyle Burroughs to be activated in order to be placed on waivers and then ultimately assigned to Ontario. And so in order to make room for him to place him on waivers, Warren Foegele was placed on injured reserve. Now, Warren Foegele was placed on injured reserve retroactive to the first game he missed, because when you get placed on injured reserve, you have to miss, I believe, 7 games. Or 7 days, 7 calendar days. So it's been more than that. So Warren Foegele is now free to be removed from injured reserve whenever he is healthy enough to do so. There's no clear-cut indication of when that will be. I didn't see him on the ice today. And Jim Hiller had previously said that he was quote unquote not close. Now, not close doesn't mean anything, just to be perfectly clear. One of my problems with the way a lot of media communications are handled in professional sports is that language that doesn't actually mean anything is used as if it definitively means something. So not close, soon, later, better, worse, all of these words don't mean anything unless you clearly define them. So not close could mean 2 days, not close could mean 2 years, right? Not close. Close is a relative term. So I don't know when Warren Foegele will be back. The organization has not designated him as day-to-day or week-to-week or anything like that. All we know is he is currently on injured reserve, but he is free to be activated off of injured reserve. There are no limitations as far as the timeline whenever he is deemed healthy enough to return. So for now, Kyle Burroughs is an Ontario Reign. Warren Fogle is on the injured reserve, and that is the only player currently on the injured reserve for the LA Kings. I hope my switching over to a different tab didn't affect anything at all. So that's the update on the roster. Again, for those of you who may have joined late, practice-wise, Corey Perry replaced Andrei Kuzmenko on the top power play unit. Yoel Armia replaced Andrei Kuzmenko on the number one line at even strength. Andrei Kuzmenko appears to be joining Phil Deneau and Trevor Moore on the third line. The second line, if you want to call it that, will be Alex Laferriere, Quentin Byfield, and I blanked on Kevin Fiala's name. How dare I? Which means I have to update my lines, because that means that likely the fourth line will be Malat, Turcotte, and Perry. But again, Perry will be playing on that top power play unit. So that is what happened to Pratt. Oh, and Dumoulin and Ceci were reunited as a pair, as were Anderson and Doughty. So it was a pretty eventful practice, honestly, for a day that I thought I was just going to kind of roll in and watch some guys twirl around on the ice. There's a lot happening, a lot to be talked about with Jim Hiller. Not a lot of revelations talking to the players, but some good stuff from Jim Hiller. He was asked about the minutes. We got him to comment on Anderson and Doughty, so that was great. The next two games at home against the Jets and the Panthers, if I'm not mistaken, and we will see how many of these changes actually last into the start of the game, and how many of them actually last till the end of the game. Because just because they try something in practice and just because they start a game with it, as we all know, doesn't necessarily mean that is the permanent state of things. Jim Hiller likes to mix things up, and by his own admission today, a lot of it is situational, right? Again, asked him whether or not there was an ideal blueprint for lines and D pairs, and the answer was no. And I think I like that answer, but I'm one of those people, and I know you're not supposed to think about video games as they apply to real life, but I'm one of those people that likes the idea of setting a lineup, whether it's fantasy, video games, whatever the impulse is. You set your lineup, and that's what it looks like. And then if you need to make tweaks situationally, you make your tweaks, but you have a sort of foundation that you can return to. That's just my own personal preference. I don't know. Maybe that's not how professional sports really works, but in my mind, it always has been. So asked early in the season, before the season started, one of the 10 questions we laid out again was, will those top forward lines have consistency? Will the chemistry be as strong as it was to end the season last year? And at least to start, it looks like the answer is no, which was going to be trouble in my mind if you have to jumble and if you have to start adjusting, because now you're in the process of trying to rediscover chemistry for line combinations that haven't existed before. I have no idea if Yoel Armia, Anze Kopitar, and Adrian Kempe are a good combo, because the three players have never played together consistently. And right off the top, my first question is, does Yoel Armia even like playing the left wing? He's a right-handed shot. Adrian Kempe's a left-handed shot. Adrian Kempe's been playing the right side for a few years now. But Adrian Kempe has played left wing, center, and now right wing. So how's that going to work with Yoel Armia? It made a certain degree of sense when Andrei Kuzmenko was placed on that line. He's a right shot who is playing the left wing. But then you have two European-trained players playing their off wings. Kuzmenko, a right shot, playing on the left side. Kempe, who is a left shot, playing on the right side. It opens you up to one-timers. It gives you a different look on passes, etc. But that's not Armia's game necessarily. I mean, we've heard a lot about Armia and the versatility that he brings and elements of his game that they didn't necessarily see before he got here. But I don't think Armia is anybody's idea of a speedster. A lot of Adrian Kempe's game is predicated on speed. A lot of Anze Kopitar's game is predicated on on court smart, or on ice intelligence and awareness, and being able to direct the flow of the game. So very curious to see if that works, but there's certainly no guarantee. And then Kuzmenko with Deneau and Moore, that's another huge question mark. Like, I'm not entirely sure. If Kuzmenko is going to replicate what Victor Arvidsson did, then great, because I'm sure anybody who's watched me for more than a day or two knows that I loved the Arvidsson, Deneau, and Moore line. But Arvidsson played a very specific game. And while I can see comparisons to Kuzmenko and Arvidsson, they're both right-handed shots. They're both a little bit smaller. They're both excellent playmakers. Arvidsson made plays in all three zones. And I always felt that, like, his playmaking, Arvidsson, that is, his playmaking was an incredibly underrated element of his game. What we heard about Arvidsson all the time was that he's shoot from anywhere. He's a mercenary shooter. He's, he'll just fire the puck. And while that was definitely true, I never felt that that's where the positive impact of his game came from. He was physical. He was defensive minded. He would block shots high in the defensive zone. He had an active stick. When the three of them were going, Danault, Moore, and Arvidsson, that is, their sticks were everywhere. They were disrupting breakout attempts from the opponents. They were turning the puck over deep in the defensive zone, or in the offensive zone, excuse me. Whenever the other team would sort of try and fall back to regroup and break out of the zone, you could count on one of those three guys' sticks being in the way, tipping a pass, creating a turnover, and then they would pounce on, the opponent, and they were going the opposite way. And that's how they scored a lot of goals. I don't know if Andrei Kuzmenko can play that way. I don't know if he'll want to play that way. I don't know if the chemistry is going to work. I hope it does. Obviously we all hope it does, but we don't know. So that's two new lines that we're looking at. We have no idea if they work or not. The third line is, the fourth line is, it's remains a collection of pieces that don't really have anywhere else to go, which is concerning to me. I mean, this is why I go back to the idea of having a foundation, a baseline view of what the team is in your mind. And to start the season, I assumed it was Armia, Turcotte, and Perry. And I'm still not sure that that's a great line, but that's what I thought it would be. And I don't think we've seen that line more than any other combination on the fourth line. And now we've got Malat, Turcotte, and Perry, which has been an effective line, and I don't have any problem with. But again, it's not what I thought we were getting. And the second line, Laferriere, Byfield, and Fiala, has looked good at times, but it has not looked as good as it looked at the end of last season. So that's the forward situation. Again, we're going to try the Dumoulin and Ceci experiment. It didn't go great the first three games, so we'll go back to the well and see if it works now. But that's a lot of question marks created 13 games into the season. And while the Kings are not out of a playoff spot yet, as I pull up my phone to look at the standings, they're not deep in a playoff spot. And it's weird. It's early. The Anaheim Ducks are currently tied with Vegas and Edmonton for first place in the Pacific, first, second, and third, I suppose. The Kings are not in a playoff spot, depending on how you look at it. The Kings are tied with Seattle with 14 points. But Anaheim, Vegas, Edmonton, and Dallas all have 15 points. So it's weird. It's early. Teams are jumbled. No team has created a huge distance between themselves and the teams behind them. But 5-4-4 is not as good as it sounds. It's 538 points percentage. And, at some point the Kings have to start winning games. I hate the concept of the panic button. It's not how I like to operate. It's not how I like the things that I care about to operate. But I was asking the question today at practice, when is the threshold reached where uncomfortable questions start being asked? Because yes, they went 4-0-1 on that road trip, but as previously stated, it wasn't the most compelling 4-0-1 road trip of all time. And if any of those games go the other way, if they lose those overtime games, or if they don't come back, I can't remember what the stat was where I looked up, but they've given up a lot of third period goals. They've given up a lot of games. I think it was 8 of 13 games so far. They've allowed 3 unanswered goals. That's a lot. That needs to be tightened up. That needs to be fixed. And if you can't find a way, then sooner or later, uncomfortable questions start being the norm and start getting asked louder and louder. And the shadow, over all of this, of course, is the contract status of Adrian Kempe. Those questions are only get louder. Sorry to bum everybody out on a Wednesday morning. I wasn't really thinking about this as being a bummer. Actually, is today Wednesday? I don't even know what day. No, it's Tuesday, right? Yeah, it's Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday, not Wednesday. No, it's Monday. I'm totally lost. No idea what day of the week it is, everybody. I didn't mean to bum everybody out on a Monday, is what I meant to say. But when big swings are being taken and big swings are being missed on, and then it forces you to scramble and do things that you're not comfortable with, or you don't know how they're going to work out, it makes people nervous. One of the questions I was taught very early when it comes to this question asking thing is never ask a question of somebody that you don't know the answer to. Right? If you're a quote unquote journalist, which I don't consider myself one, but if you're interviewing somebody, for example, and I learned this lesson the hard way years ago, never ask a question you don't know the answer to. And that's where we're at right now I feel like, or we're getting more and more into with the Kings in the 2025-26 season, is we're starting to ask questions of the roster that we don't know the answer to. And that is when you start to get into nervous territory and it starts being a little dicey. Anyway, before we wrap it up, I'm just going to throw it out there. If anybody has any specific questions, now's your chance. Go ahead, throw them in the comment section on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you're watching this, or you can text 323-628-1008. I'll give it a few minutes. And then I think I'm going to wrap it up because we've been going about 25 minutes. And the simple reality is the post-practice report, but I wanted to try out the new graphic. I wanted to try out the new camera. So anybody watching, let me know. Does it look better than it looked in the past? Because I hope it did. Otherwise, I wasted some money. We will be doing a post-game report after the Jets game, after the Panthers game. I will try to do a morning skate update. It'll be much shorter than this, but hopefully we'll be doing that from the practice facility tomorrow and on Thursday. Is that when they play the Panthers? Thank you to the person who said it looks good. So that's, keep your eyes open, and we're trying out all sorts of stuff behind the scenes here. There's an article up on the royalhalf.com outlaying all of the weird details about what's happened so far this season. I'm calling it Bizarro season, and there's all sorts of anomalies, right? They haven't won at home. All these games going to the shootout and overtime, and the Dumoulin and Ceci pair that stayed together as a penalty kill unit, the unanswered goals. It's just a weird season. So one quick question: how do you check line combinations without numbers? I go to my college team practice and I can't even tell. It's very hard. I hate it when I'm watching the practices and I can't see numbers on the backs of jerseys. It's only the numbers on the helmets, and I'm squinting and I'm asking everybody, who's that? And fortunately, the Kings don't have that many right shot players. So most of the time, if you see somebody who's a right-handed shot, you can tell pretty quickly who it is because body types and facial hair and skating style and all that. But when there's a bunch of guys that look exactly the same, or worse, there's 5 guys in the lineup and I don't know what they look like because they're like, I still don't know what Yoel Armia's face looks like. If you showed me a picture of Brian Dumoulin, Yoel Armia, I think I know what Cody Ceci looks like now, but like if you showed me those 2 guys, I don't know what they look like. I just don't know yet. Just having to get used to it. So it's tough. It's tough at a practice when they don't have numbers on. You just have to start looking for little details like equipment, unique things that are unique. Like, so for example, I learn goalies pads, what the pads look like, so that at a glance I can tell who's in net, because oftentimes the masks aren't different enough from a distance and you can't see any numbers, and everybody plays the same as far as lefty righty when you're goaltending, or not everybody, but most of them. And so I just look at the goalie pads and I go, okay, I know the patterns on the pads, and so I know who's who. When they wear the solid silver pads, it's a bit tougher, but Kemper's pads are slightly different than Forsberg's. And so I can tell at a glance, okay, we're looking at Darcy Kemper, not Anton Forsberg. A little bit harder when they're practicing. And usually on practice, the defensemen all wear black. That was not the case today. That can also be helpful because Brandt Clark and Drew Doughty look nothing like each other. And those are the 2 right-handed shots, or in Cody Ceci. But Cody Ceci, I know what Brandt Clark looks like. I know what Drew Doughty looks like. So if I see a right-handed shot defenseman and I don't know what he looks like, it's probably Cody Ceci. Anyway, I hope that answers that question. It's not a great answer, but those are the tricks of the trade. Anyway, that is going to wrap it up for this practice report. I hope it worked out. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And for those who asked, this will be made available for download on the Apple Podcast and Spotify stream. I had not done that previously, but we'll begin to do that now. So thanks everybody for joining me. We're going to be doing this a lot more. We're still in the experimental phase for a lot of this stuff, but I appreciate everybody sticking with me for that. For this part of it, working the kinks out. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you after the game tomorrow.